Move straight to our COVID update, our item 7.5, and let me see here. We do have Dr. Pace with us, whose beard has grown tremendously since the last time we've seen him. Welcome back, Dr. Pace.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning to everybody, the board, and thanks for the opportunity to speak today. I'm Gary Pace, the former public health officer in Lake County, and I now have another job, so I appreciate your working with me around the timing because I have to jump off at 10. But I was asked to come and provide some more information on COVID, especially around the Delta, the changes coming with the Delta variant. So I did see a tape of the presentation last week with Dr. Evans and Sarah, and you know, it's very concerning, the situation in Lake right now. And so I think it's really important for people to be informed and to be taking the right precautions. And there's a lot of changes happening right now. So I'll be real brief. I know people want to get on and kind of give their perspective on how they see things are unfolding. And so I want to be sure to give them time. But I think Sarah's here, and she should go first and give the data.
Good morning, supervisors. I have a brief update. It's fairly similar to last week. First, we'll start with testing in Lake County, and statewide testing continues to increase. Lake County is testing at a rate similar to the state right now. The testing positivity in Lake County, the 7-day average, is about 16%, significantly higher than the state, but you can see this really steep line since mid-June that the state is increasing rapidly in terms of its testing positivity. We are now seeing a daily case rate of about 50 per 100,000, which is what we expected based off the numbers that we saw last week. Lake County, as we stated last week, has had the highest daily case rate in the state for pretty much the entire month of July. And the state daily case rate, the most recent, is about 17 per 100,000, and you can see the slope of this line here, and I expect that to continue to increase. There's been an additional COVID death since we spoke last week, bringing the total in Lake County to 66. So there have been 3 COVID deaths in the month of July among Lake County residents. And I know that several other deaths are currently under review. Okay, here is the epi curve that we looked at last week. We were looking at this number and concerned about this increase in cases that we've seen since mid-June. In the last 7 days, as of yesterday afternoon, 320 new cases have been identified, bringing the total to nearly 4,400. What I want to note on this graph is that you'll see the N is different here. This graph is showing about 100 fewer cases. That's because the data haven't come over from the second system. So I expect to see, once that happens, the contact tracing and case investigation happens, that we'll see this line increase and be more similar to the previous week. I do not believe that we're seeing a decrease. Just wanted to give you a more regional perspective. Again, here's Lake County. This is the daily case rate over time since the beginning of April. Here is Lake County showing about 50 per 100,000. It will increase over the next couple of days, and I expect over the next couple of weeks. Your neighbors in Mendocino and Napa and Sonoma are about seeing an increase similar to the state, approaching 20 per 100,000. In Lake County on July 31st, at a point in time, it was reported that there were 31 COVID hospitalized patients. From this graph, this gives you the view of the entire pandemic. You can see the 14-day average is approaching 10 hospitalized people, which is looking similar or reaching towards what we saw in the winter surge. Of course, this doesn't include people who are transferred out of county and receiving hospital care out of county. 3 COVID ICU patients on July 31st. Again, you can see the 14-day average and how that compares to the rest of the pandemic. So as we discussed, vaccination is one of the best interventions we have to reduce hospitalizations and deaths. The latest data tells us that 53% of people 12 and older are fully vaccinated in Lake County. That's 29,000 people, and 40% of the eligible population remains unvaccinated. Lastly, I want to share a bit of good news. We are seeing in Lake County and statewide an increase in the number of people who are getting their first doses. So you may have seen this reported nationally as well. So starting in sort of early July, the 7-day average of someone getting their first dose was 47 people. And you can see over the month of July that this has increased in Lake County to 86. So there's speculation that that's people responding to a variety of things. I think a lot of the thinking is that's in part people seeing friends and family get vaccinated and concern about the Delta variant. So the graph on the bottom shows the entire, since the end of December when the vaccines first became available. Lake County is the darker blue. You can see the rolling average of first doses. So here we see this increase. So this is positive news. And as you continue your efforts, just of note that the 18 to 49-year-old population, about 56% of them are unvaccinated, and we still have more than 1 in 3 people over the age of 65 who are unvaccinated. And these certainly should be target populations because they're at higher risk for severe illness and death. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. So as you can see, the situation's kind of worrisome. The hospitals are filling up and the cases are increasing with no end in sight. And there's still a lot of vulnerable people out there that are unvaccinated. And so I just wanted to go over, the situation's changing a lot right now. And I just wanted to kind of point out some of those changes and maybe give a little bit of kind of context to it all. So I think the most important thing to remember is that the vaccine continues to be very protective against serious illness and death. So this is really a blessing, and I think it should be kind of the most important thing to think about is vaccination and how well it's working. It's getting a little more confusing because it seems that people do get infected when even though they've been vaccinated, but what's being done by getting vaccinated is you're protecting against serious illness and death. And the data is very clear about that at this point, that 90% of the people in the hospitals are unvaccinated and tend to be younger, tend to be the 20s, 30s, 40-year-olds now, because the older folks tend to be vaccinated. This is around the state and around the country. So 90% of the people in the hospitals are unvaccinated. The people that are vaccinated that tend to end up in the hospitals or dying are folks that are older or are older or have other underlying immune compromised situations. So if you get vaccinated, you really don't have to worry much about hospitalization and death. The things that kind of a bunch of new information has come out in the last week, the Delta variant appears to be way more contagious than we originally thought. And it does seem that the vaccinated people can get it and can spread it to other vaccinated people. So this is partly why it seems like this thing is sort of gaining momentum, even in counties where there's a lot of high vaccination rates. That's where a lot of these masking discussions are coming in place and all that, is that for us to be able to stop the spread, vaccination is not adequate, but vaccination is good for stopping people getting really sick and dying. I'm caring for people now. I'm doing clinical medicine again, and the unvaccinated people can get really sick. Not everybody who's unvaccinated who gets infected gets sick, But if you see somebody that's unvaccinated and they're testing positive, we worry a lot more. The vaccinated folks tend to be getting ill. Some of them are getting ill, but it's sort of like the flu, you know, they feel crummy for a little while and then they get better and they go on about their business. So really what we're starting to see is two groups. The vaccinated group, which doesn't have to worry that much, and but you know, they can get the infection and they can get sick. The other thing that they have going is that they're able to, there's getting to be a lot of restrictions going in place now. People having to show vaccination cards to go into certain places, to get, to do certain kinds of travel, different kinds of things like that. So, and I think that's going to get to be more and more as this thing unfolds. And then there's two groups: the vaccinated group that tends to not have to worry too much about getting real sick, and the unvaccinated group, if they get in contact with somebody that's a confirmed case or they start getting sick, then it can go badly. And also now they're starting to have to kind of justify things and having to show proof that they're being required to show proof of vaccination to get into certain places, and it's not always going well. So I think the next point I want to make is the hospitals are filling up. The Lake County hospitals are filling up. Sarah reported there that there are 13 positive, COVID positive cases in the hospital, and there's 3 COVID positive cases in the ICUs locally. There's only really 8 beds kind of at baseline in Lake County in the ICUs. So, you know, it's about, you can see that there's a fair amount of capacity being taken up by COVID patients. It's important because it impacts everybody in the county. So if somebody's having a heart problem and they show up in the ER and there's no beds because a bunch of these beds are filled up, it becomes a problem for everybody. And as always in Lake County, transportation between hospitals is always an issue. And, you know, it's just a problem to get people out of the county if we need to. Also, the neighboring counties are now starting to experience a lot of people in the hospital. So, for example, in Sonoma County, on Sunday, there were 59 people that were COVID positive in the hospitals and 15 COVID positive folks in the ICU. So, you know, this is just, we're starting to see some of what we saw in the wintertime where the hospitals were filling up and it was getting a little bit anxiety provoking about if we were going to have enough capacity for everybody. At this point, regionally, it seems to be okay, but, you know, the numbers are continuing to rise. And I think one of the important points is if we had not had the vaccination push going on the last several months, the hospitals would be probably overwhelmed at this point. So we're very fortunate that all that work has gone into it and all the people have agreed to go ahead and get the vaccinations. So masking is another question that comes up. So, you know, masking clearly helps. I think when there's these discussions about the data, I don't think the data is in question anymore. And this virus is so much more contagious than the other viruses that it only makes sense to just do whatever you can to slow down and decrease the transmission. Indoor masking is starting to become a big issue. It just came out today that the Bay Area health departments are making indoor masking mandatory now. So, and the businesses are going to be the ones that are responsible for enforcing this. So it's, you know, it goes into effect today, I believe. And so this is the neighboring counties, Sonoma, Marin down there. Napa is not doing it. The Board of Supervisors in Lake, my understanding is you all came out with a recommendation that masking occur indoors. And I think this is only common sense. So I think this is a very, very good idea. And I think it's important for people to do this as much as possible. High risk situations outdoors, it's probably smart to wear a mask there too. Again, this is much more transmissible than before. And so even when you could get away with kind of doing things and not getting sick, you say, well, I didn't wear a mask all last year, it didn't matter. This thing is a lot more transmissible, and I think you should take whatever precautions you can to slow it down for your own health and also for the just the community good. There's been some questions about events, like what should people do about planning for events? And the state guidelines haven't really changed yet. So you can go on the CDPH website and check those out. But, outdoor events are allowed. There's distancing recommended and, suggestions about hand washing and masking and things like that. But I think these will probably get tighter in the coming weeks. And I think for folks that are planning for, say, September and October, there's like what you can get away with, and then there's what makes good sense. And so, I think you probably need to be anticipating that this is going to get worse in the next month or two, and that there are things you can do to minimize risk in terms of masking, in terms of requiring vaccination, things like that. And, being outdoors is by far better. Less crowded is by far better. All these kind of things can help, because there are these super spreader events that are happening around the country. And, if you're doing a fundraiser or something, you really would not want to have it be a super spreader event that somebody had a bad outcome from. So how do you do all this? The guidance is changing very quickly. The state guidance is in place, but, it's the same kind of common sense measures to decrease transmission going forward. So just a couple more things and then I'll be done. If people are symptomatic, you should get tested. If you're vaccinated and symptomatic, you should get tested. And if you're positive, you should stay home for 10 days and notify your contacts, all the same as before. If you're negative, it's probably something else. If you're symptomatic and your test comes back negative, it's probably not the COVID, and especially if you're vaccinated, you're probably okay to move forward. If you're unvaccinated and you're symptomatic, you should get tested. And if you're positive, stay home and let your contacts know, same thing as before. And especially if you're unvaccinated, you should monitor if you're getting sick, because, if you get really worsening and short of breath, you probably need to think about going to the emergency room, because this can get really bad if you're not vaccinated. If you're a close contact of a confirmed case, vaccinated folks, the recommendation right now, it's very different. It's like you just monitor for symptoms and you can go to work, you can go do things. If you're unvaccinated, you should go into quarantine like before. So there's a big split there if you're a close contact to a confirmed case, whether you're vaccinated or unvaccinated. So, again, these things are changing quickly. It's very confusing, and I think we just have to try to do the best we can moving forward. We're learning new stuff every day. So just a couple conclusions, and then I'll stop, is this virus is changing, the guidance is evolving, and we're probably not going to be reaching herd immunity anytime soon. I think the hope was that we would get to a certain level of vaccination rates, for a certain level of people who had been infected, and we would have 90% or something, and we'd reach herd immunity. It looks like that's not going to happen now, because even when you're vaccinated, we're still able to transmit it. So it's going to keep going around the community. So we're probably going to be dealing with this for a while. Eventually, our immune systems will learn to cope with this virus, and it will probably end up to be more like a flu situation, or maybe even like the common cold situation, where it's just kind of low level. But right now, our immune systems have not seen this thing before, and we're struggling to keep up with it. The vaccines do help. It's hugely helpful. This is really a blessing of modern science that we've been able to get this. And but what it's doing is slowing it down and protecting people from the severe illness. It's not slowing down the transmission, and this virus is continuing to mutate. So we'll have to see. I would suspect we're going to be needing booster shots down the road at some point, but we'll have to see how that goes. And so I think, the bottom line is, I just encourage everybody to take this thing really seriously. We're in a new phase now. We were kind of hoping this thing was going to draw to a close. It's not. It's not going to anytime soon. But it's getting more complicated, vaccinated versus unvaccinated. The masking guidance is changing. And, I think it's just, we just have to do the best we can. I really encourage people, if you've been thinking about getting vaccinated and haven't gotten around to it yet, to go do it. Do it as soon as possible. It takes a few weeks before the protection really kicks in. And so the sooner you get there, the sooner you're going to be less at risk of getting in trouble. And so I think that's it. Thank you. I think if there's specific questions about the local response, Denise is here, and I think Carolyn might be here as well, so they'll be able to answer that more. But that's kind of the overview of the current thinking now about the way it's going with the Delta variant. So thank you.
Dr. Pace, thank you very much for your presentation and coming back to spend time with us to discuss this unfortunate reoccurring issue that just doesn't want to go away. Let's bring it to the board. We have Supervisor Pyska with a comment.
Hi, Dr. Pace. Thank you for coming today. It's really great to see you. I was just wondering if maybe Sarah could help us understand the age range of the people that are hospitalized and also the age range of the 3 people that have died this month.
Hi, Supervisor. I don't have the information on the 3 deaths that happened this month, the age range. I can, I think, I'll pull up the data of all deaths. We'll move on to other questions and be able to share that today. For hospitalizations, and I think we've discussed this at the board before, the challenge is how the data are reported to the hospitals, or excuse me, how the data are reported from the hospitals to the state. So the short answer is I don't have data on all hospitalized patients and their age, because it's reported straight up to the state and it's not disaggregated. So there's, for some cases, we have information on age who are hospitalized, but not all hospitalized patients. I wish I could report that to you. And again, this is an issue statewide. So I think I'll pause there and maybe you can continue with questions, and then I'd be happy to come back on to show you the age range of all deaths. I have that readily available.
Thanks. And I know it's difficult to find this data, and we do ask this often, but if at any point we could ever figure out how many of our residents are in hospitals out of the county, I think that's really important too, for us to be able to look at that impact that we're not seeing locally.
Supervisor Scott?
Thank you, Dr. Pace, for your report today. My question, we're talking a lot about vaccines and masking, but we're not really talking about barriers. Should we be putting our barriers back up even though we are vaccinated and have masks on?
You know, I think the barriers help. Anything that prevents the transmission. The problem is that, you know, another part of this that's the way the thinking has changed is this whole discussion about droplet versus airborne. So, you know, some of it is spread by the heavy droplets that go down quickly, and the barriers really are good at preventing that spread. But, you know, now more understanding has come that there's an aerosol component of it as well. So the little tiny particles that sort of stay in the air and hover in the air for a while and can circulate around the air, the barriers don't necessarily prevent that. So the barriers are probably helpful, especially if you're in situations where people take their masks off for, like, you know, if, I don't know, there's different situations where that occurs, or if there's not good compliance with the masking. The mask is preferable. The mask is better. It's like the face shields. The mask is better than the face shield because it can go out into the air, whereas the mask prevents it. So, you know, I'm kind of hedging a little bit, but I think it's not a bad idea to do that. If it's a huge effort, I'm not sure that it's maybe worth it. I think it's probably more worth it to work with the masking part of it.
If I may jump back in to share the data on deaths just really quickly. So I looked at these data last week. So this was before the last COVID death. So I'll start on the right because you asked about age range. So of the 65 COVID deaths among Lake County residents, 37% or 24 have been among people 80 years or older. 42% have been among people 65 to 79, and 15% people 50 to 64, and 4 deaths, or 6%, among people 18 to 49. So this is throughout the pandemic before we had the benefit of the vaccine. And where I'll draw your attention to this table on the left. So looked at it by type of living situation, we know that there was a lot of focus and attention on skilled nursing facilities because those are high risk settings, particularly before the vaccine, and 22% of deaths were in skilled nursing facilities, 6% or 4 in residential facilities, and then 3 out of 4 deaths, roughly, or 7 out of 10, were in what I'm calling non-congregate settings, so people who are not living in one of these types of facilities. So I've called this before community deaths. And of those 47, here you can see the zip codes in which those people lived throughout the county. About 34% or 16 lived in zip code 95422, and about 21% in zip code 95453. That's the latest I have. We can certainly report next time we present more information on the more recent deaths.
Supervisor Scott, you had something more to add?
Nope.
Okay. Any other comment or questions from supervisors? So I do have a question, and I guess it's a comment / question / request. I know that data is difficult to come by, but I think data is the most important thing that we can have in order to persuade the public on whether or not they want to get vaccinated. Using national numbers or statewide numbers does not always equate to what's happening specifically or locally. And if we have data to specify what's happening here locally, it has a higher potential impact on persuading people to change their behavior. If there's an outbreak in LA, people are less likely to want to mask up here, but if there's an outbreak here, they're more likely to want to mask up here. What's right here and there is going to make that risk assessment change the final decision. And so I think it's important that we know, I know we heard today that 9 out of 10 that are hospitalized are unvaccinated. I would like to request that we really get the data of this latest situation, because if we're looking all the way back to last April, last March, that was a vastly different situation than what we're in today. Today we have tools, today we have a weapon to be able to combat the issue of the virus versus what it was at the beginning. And so to look at the aggregate is not a bad thing, but I think we also need to look at the last 2 or 3 months where we've had a large increase of vaccinated folks and seeing what that data looks like in comparison to before, to really show that this is, and not really show, but show the data itself. And I'm assuming from what I know and from what I'm hearing constantly, that it will show that being vaccinated is a better situation for all of us due to the fact that it protects you from either severe illness or even getting ill in the first place, and all the way to the point of death. And so if we can get to those numbers, I know that I'm reaching out directly to Adventist Health in order to capture those numbers rather than trying to go through some sort of state reporting system. That might be an easier way. So I would ask that you please use us, because we do have contacts and connections within those hospitals. I know you do as well, but I know it's also added work in order to collect all this information and put it together for us. But I think it's important information and important data that we have the ability to provide and convey to the public as to what truly is happening since our drop-off of people getting vaccinated. Right now, it's surging, and you mentioned that. I just read an article in the Mercury News that we're the top county in the state of California for the increases of vaccination. I think it was a 48% increase day to day. People are making a risk assessment of the situation and deciding, okay, I need to go ahead and get vaccinated. So I think we need to provide that data. And I know it's difficult, but let's work together to get that so that we can break those barriers that make it difficult right now to access that information. I'm sure the hospitals have it somewhere. It just might not be easily accessible through some reporting software.
Thank you, Supervisor. If I may, just a quick response, and I'll work with the team to seek out the hospital data. I do want to make really clear that, and perhaps we can show this next time we present, I've calculated the daily case rate among fully vaccinated Lake County residents and unvaccinated Lake County residents in the month of June, and the daily case rate among people who are unvaccinated is about 6 times higher than it is among fully vaccinated individuals. So again, that speaks only to risk of infection, but the risk is about 6 times higher, or has been, in the month of July in Lake County. And that is consistent with what we're seeing statewide. And perhaps we can bring back additional information to show that and help communicate that better. Thank you.
Correct, and I think you had that in the presentation last week. I think it was 541 total cases and only 68 of those. But I think the hospitalization and further issues and complications such as death is an important part of the conversation as well, not just the cases. And so I think if we can get that information, it would be a very valid point to make and help be more transparent with what truly is happening here locally. Supervisor Pyska, you had something you wanted to say?
Yeah, Sarah, that was for the month of July or the month of June?
Month of July.
Oh, okay, wonderful, thank you.
Any further comments from the board before we open it up for the public? All right, let's go ahead and open up for the public. If there's anybody in the board chambers that wish to speak on this item, please stand up. You have 3 minutes. And in the Zoom room, go ahead and raise your hand, and we will get to you as soon as we have time. Or as soon as we're done here in the board chamber.
I'm Joan Moss, an independent journalist. I can hear better this week, thank you. I want to share with you an article I found July 31st in the New York Times about a troubled vaccine company. And I know that we hear from the CDC, the WHO, and Dr. Pace and his staff. This is from the New York Times and from the government. I wanted you to read it. We're told that all vaccines are safe and everybody's doing great. This is a contrary opinion, and I just wanted to share it with you.
Thank you for your comment. Anyone have comments in the boardroom on this item? And if you could just put it right there on the desk, that'd be perfect. If you could just put it right there on the desk, that'd be perfect. Thank you. Looks like we don't have any comments left in the board chambers. Let's go ahead and go to the Zoom room. First is Elaine Zacher. And again, you have 3 minutes, and please let us know your name just in case I got it incorrect.
Yes, that is my name. This is Elaine Zacher. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I would like to speak about the PCR test because it is always mentioned as part of the public health presentations. And the data on the cases is always, well, it's probably based on the PCR test since that is the standard test for cases. I assume you all know how the PCR test works, that whether someone tests positive or negative depends on how many cycles of amplification are used for the test. Below about 25, pretty much everybody tests negative. 40 or over, pretty much everybody tests positive. So you can see the test is subject to manipulation. And I want to mention that there are a number of lawsuits alleging that the PCR test is a fraud. Reiner Fulmick, a consumer protection lawyer, is bringing a class action suit in Germany against government officials and PCR manufacturers. He has evidence that the PCR test is completely unsuitable for detecting infection, and that it's not even licensed or approved for diagnostic purposes. Reiner Fulmick also plans on filing a lawsuit in the US, alleging that there is no corona pandemic and there is only a PCR test pandemic. Also, attorney Thomas Rentz is filing a federal lawsuit in the US, in federal court, in a US court. He's filing it on behalf of a group of doctors, medical doctors. The defendant is Xavier Becerra, the Secretary of the US Department of Health and Human Services. The lawsuit is full of evidence and expert testimony dismantling the so-called emergency and the efficacy of the shots. The lawsuit alleges that the PCR tests have artificially increased the number of cases. The lawsuit notes that the manufacturers of the PCR tests include a disclaimer that the FDA has not determined that the test is safe or effective for the detection of SARS-CoV-2. Manufacturer inserts furnished with the PCR test.
Your 3 minutes are up. Please finish with your last comment.
Okay, manufacturer inserts furnished with the PCR test include disclaimers stating that the PCR test should not be used to diagnose COVID-19. Thank you.
Thank you. It's funny how we're suing for PCR tests for COVID-19, even though they've been using PCR tests for previous conditions to test for. That was never an issue. Let's move on to Ahava Rose.
Thank you. Yes, it's funny. Thank you. Yes, it's funny because we've also used things like titer tests and what's the other one? There are other tests. There are other tests that are diagnostic and qualitative, in fact, that are not so much quantitative, that are not so much qualitative. Polymerase chain reaction can detect a genetic sequence, which we now know also that SARS-CoV-2 is only held in digital databases. There is no certified reference material sample. So how does comprehending viewpoints with zero funding from interested parties liken me to a bigot regarding your comment last week? My nonviolent lifestyle maybe means not relying on animal products like aborted fetal cells, or maybe doing thorough enough research to know that the main component of nanogel, an mRNA shot ingredient, is graphene oxide, a known electromagnetic toxic poison. Maybe it's because, Mr. Sabatier, you knew I'd look into Dr. Charlie Evans of last week to find that the health officer you chose to follow has a 1-star rating online that reads like a classic horror story. You may not have looked deeply into the Mounting Bears data or heard the Harvard study concluding that less than 1% of the adverse events are even reported, so maybe you don't feel for the victims who are turned away by their own doctors and hospitals who refuse to report their accidents, including tremors, seizures, transverse myelitis, blood clots, and myocarditis, while insurance companies refuse to help them. Not to mention the pharmaceutical companies shirking liability for all harm since 1986, while making over $18 billion in the second quarter of this year alone. You may not know how much insurance companies pay the doctors for each completed round of injections, but as a legislative body, you all should know. California law states vocal emergencies can only be called at the introduction of an infectious disease, and we are well over 17 months past this. California Penal Code 1483 states it is a crime to report a false emergency. The health officer is required by law to give you evidence, but thus far they've given you lies promoted by fraudulent qualitative testing for a digital sequence, while there are physical certified reference materials available by Biocysto, a company purchasable from lab companies, for every other microbe and contaminant known. Title 18 U.S. Code 1030-8 says it's a federal crime to provide false or misleading information relating to biological hazards or conducting hoaxes and is punishable by life in prison. Title 18 U.S. Code 1040 is a federal law against fraud in connection with the disaster or emergency benefits, punishable by 30 years. And California Health and Safety Code 24171 declares individual rights to determine what's done with one's own body. And at that, California Health and Safety Code 24172 grants citizens the right to refuse medical experiments without duress, coercion, or influence. Government Code 1292Q clarifies religious rights to abstain from procedures conflicting with religious or spiritual beliefs. But not only that, the California Health and Safety Code 101080 requires a board of supervisors to proclaim the termination of a local emergency at the earliest possible date. Ms. Mariscos has given us the data that shows that 80% of these cases are over 65, 80% of the deaths, may I correct myself. So 66 deaths over 4,394 cases is 1.5%. 50 cases over 1,000 is 0.05% cases right now. You're not immune from the law. Was there a state of emergency when 26 people died of the flu in 2017? I don't want to put you on notice for violation of these codes, but I am done watching the puppets of Big Pharma's medical technology.
Your 3 minutes are up.
They're gaslighting you.
Your 3 minutes are up. Thank you very much for your comment. Next, we have Kay Toy. If you could please give us your name.
Hi, this is Kathy Toy. I had two questions actually for Dr. Pace. Dr. Pace, I wanted to make sure that I understood what you were saying. I heard you to say that the vaccinations are not slowing transmission. Is that what I heard you say? And I was wondering how that data was gathered, to get that information.
If it's possible for you to finish your comment, and when we'll go ahead and get you that answer.
Okay, and the other question was, a lot of us are wondering when testing is done, does it actually reveal whether or not it is the Delta variant? So those are my two questions, and thank you very much for the information that you've given us today, Dr. Pace.
Thank you for the questions. Dr. Pace, if you can answer those.
Hi. The first question is a really good one because this is new and this is kind of really evolving quickly. A couple weeks ago, we were all thinking that it was much less transmissible amongst folks that were vaccinated. There's about a little less than 2 weeks ago, the CDC came out with their big kind of change in the masking guidance. And people were kind of confused as to what was going on. And there's been a couple studies and there's been a couple kind of case studies that came out in the news at the end of, basically early last week, or a little bit at the end of the week before, that was showing fairly widespread transmission amongst vaccinated people. So, for example, there was a wedding or there was the issue in Provincetown where there was a big gathering in Provincetown. I think it was over 4th of July, Provincetown, Massachusetts. And they went and really kind of dissected this data, and they found that, a large percentage of the people were vaccinated already. So it's very much not widespread kind of case-controlled studies like we like to see, but sort of kind of spot testing and recognizing that, oh my goodness, this seems to be happening. We didn't think this was going to be happening, and it's really starting to influence the way we're thinking. So it's still very early in the understanding of that. But if you go and look in some of the mainstream press over the last week or so, they're mentioning a lot about Provincetown. There's a couple different studies that came out that really influenced the CDC's guidance in that. The other question was about the Delta variant. The regular PCR testing does not determine what variant it is. The state is pulling certain samples, a certain percentage of samples from every region, and then having to do the genomic sequencing. It takes a little while, and we can also send specific samples that we're concerned about. Say there's an outbreak in some place, we can send some samples there to see if it's the Delta variant. But, it's well over 60% in the state now seems to be that it is the Delta variant, and it's probably going to continue increasing because it's so much more contagious. So at this point, I think we pretty much need to just assume that's what's going on.
Thank you for your response, Dr. Pace. Next is phone 1113. If you could please provide your name. And you have 3 minutes.
Yes, hi, this is Will Tuttle. I'm speaking out yet again on behalf of myself and thousands of other residents of Lake County who respect their native health and intelligence enough to refuse these toxic vaccine and masking coercions, and on behalf of children as well and future generations who are depending on us, do the right thing and protect our basic human rights to bodily autonomy, informed consent, and freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, and freedom of religion. It's becoming obvious that the whole COVID narrative is a huge fraud, as we've been hearing, and it's a crime against humanity that's being perpetrated through massive censorship of doctors, scientists, and journalists, and through a continuous flood of fear-based lies and propaganda. Why do our elected officials refuse to uphold their oath to defend our constitutional rights? Why do you, our elected officials, unquestioningly support and encourage the harming and possible killing of uninformed and misinformed people? What we are seeing now is the unraveling of the whole COVID fraud. Last week, the CDC openly admitted that the PCR test, its gold standard for determining COVID cases, cannot discriminate between COVID and the flu. So the whole foundation of this shameful charade is now laid bare for those with eyes to see. Those who refuse to see can rightly be called Nazis. Now this week, the CDC is telling us that, quote, universal masking is essential to reduce transmission of the Delta variant. This amounts to claiming that masks offer more protection than vaccination. On top of this, the new CDC document says, quote, new research suggests that individuals infected with Delta may be able to transmit the virus as easily as those who are unvaccinated. Studies in Singapore, Israel, and other countries show that 75% of the new COVID infections occur in people who are vaccinated. The CDC also reports that 74% of new COVID cases in Massachusetts are in fully vaccinated people. Even by its own data, the CDC's and Big Pharma's push for people to be vaccinated makes no rational sense at all, except to increase vaccine profits and also to increase vaccine-caused deaths and injuries, which continue to skyrocket to unprecedented heights. Many of the world's top virologists and vaccinologists are now saying that the new COVID illnesses and variants are actually the illnesses and harms being caused by the vaccine. Dr. Robert Malone, the main inventor of the mRNA technology, is calling this the deadliest vaccine in history, quote, a vaccinologist's worst nightmare, and his voice, like that of other leading experts, is being brutally censored by the pharma-controlled media. According to the Nuremberg principles, also adopted by the United States, if local health and government officials blindly go along with the orders they are getting from superiors and insist on being Nazis, and this leads to the death and injury of many people, they are not just civilly but also criminally liable for the harm they are causing. So in closing, I hereby request that you, our elected county officials, fulfill your civic obligations and require the county health department to research and report to you all the injuries and deaths occurring after and connected with these
3
COVID
minutes are
injections.
up.
Lies and censorship go together, and the light of truth is the best medicine for all these illnesses.
Yeah,
Thank you
3
very
minutes
much.
are up.
Mr. Chair, just a reminder about Dr. Pace's time.
Yes, I was looking at that, and we do have some more public comments, but just to let everyone know that some of the questions that might be directed towards Dr. Pace may need to be responded to in our next meeting in the following week when we have COVID-19 update again, as Dr. Pace does need to leave us possibly in a few minutes. So we'll see what we can do. Trying to replace myself on track here. Goodness gracious. Joseph Eckhart.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning.
I'm going to be pretty brief because, I don't know anybody here, and everybody previous to me were quite eloquent and seemed very prepared. But I'd like to just talk about jurisdiction and authority for all of this. Title 18 of Federal Code, Section 241 and 242 says that any color of law action can be you guys can be criminally held liable for color of law. Like, no legislature has passed any of this. You guys don't have any authority over a man, to conduct myself, my property, my DNA, my biological estate is mine and my other fellow human beings. Yeah, that's about it. Because we can say medical facts all day to you while you look at your phone and dismiss everybody. It's not going to do anything. But I think federal codes are already in the books. They're written for this reason. So we couldn't be forced to be forced to go through medical procedures without consent, enter public accommodations before undergoing a medical intervention, like putting a mask on, blocking my God-given right to breathe the gas pressure that's provided for me. Yeah, that's about it. I think it's morally wrong.
Okay, thank you for your comment. Next is Aaron McCarrick.
Hi, I'm not sure if my unmute worked. This is Erin McCarrick in Clear Lake. I just wanted to give a thank you to Dr. Pace and the patience and the guidance and the leadership that he and all of the folks at the health department have provided over this past year. It's been rough, it's been unknown. They've been following the scientific method and scientific process to give us the best information that they can. So very much appreciate it. Best of luck in the next venture. And I got vaccinated. I feel great, and I hope everyone else does too, because they're giving us some good science, and I appreciate your work. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Next is phone 6478.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. You have 3 minutes.
Yeah, my name is Madeline, and I spoke a few times, and last time I was really a little shocked because I really demanded for some more time it's obviously we have two strains in our population, the ones who stand for masks and injections, and the other ones, it's a shot. It's not a vaccine, by the way. And the other ones who don't want all that. And so we only get 3 minutes. And we are the people who pay for the boards, for all the officials. And it's the board and the officials who have to serve us and hear us. And we're very much scientific, a lot of us and a lot of these doctors who know the truth, and they should be able to put the case widely in for everybody to hear. So we have actually a choice to vaccine or not vaccine or taking the shot, like I said. So please, I like to urge that these aren't just bigots. Like this was the answer last time. They're just bigots, the ones who are on the other side of you. So I think that's very shocking. That's not scientific. Science always puts questions. It's a research. It's like in all directions. One has to research to find the truth. So please give us more time. Not just the 3 minutes and we have to rush 100 miles an hour to say what we like to say. So I thank you for hearing this, and I hope something will change. Very much hope so and urge. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. And just a correction, I did not call people who don't want to vaccinate or mask bigots. I said having a non-scientific Google warrior placed with science to discuss this is like asking a bigot to be on a diversity committee. I did not say people are bigots for not getting vaccinated. It is a choice. I'm not quite sure why people believe that there's a mandate for these things. We are trying our best to protect people and provide the information that we are receiving and that we understand to be the truth of the science of COVID-19. We are not mandating any vaccinations, so I'm not quite sure where the fear of your rights get into play here. You get your minutes for their freedom of speech. I am not interrupting, no matter how ridiculous some of these comments may seem to me, because you have that right to speak. So I don't understand some of the complaints that I'm hearing here. It just does not make any sense to me, and I'm going to stop before I say something that gets me in trouble.
Not to mention the actual really good comments, we unfortunately have to stop at 3 minutes. So it's not just the people that have things that we don't want to hear. It's people we do want to hear and want to add, but we cannot because the 3 minutes is something we have to abide by. And you know, this whole ideal of facts, I mean, you can cherry pick all day. You can use Native American references. There's all sorts of acts I have here for Native American programs if anybody wants to be a part of it, because they like to throw it out there about being Native American and free like they used to be. I wish some of these people were here in 1850 because, man, they needed someone to speak for them back then. So I don't know. I'm sorry, Bruno. Just had to add that.
Now you saved me. Any other, there's no more public comment. Let's bring it back to the board. Any final comments? Supervisor Simon.
Yeah, you just want to follow up with that. You know, obviously when this pandemic started, you know, there wasn't much information out there. So I really want to thank the board, the public health department, because that's what we're doing, trying to provide the information so you can make an educated guess. You've heard us all say in the public health department, if you have questions about your vaccine, please contact your provider and work through that process and get the information that you need. Each and every one of us as individuals can make that individual choice, and what we're attempting to do is provide this information as we move through the pandemic. We do know that the Delta variant is here. It is moving through our community in this country and the rest of the world, and we're going to continue to try and provide that information with an open mind, coming at you with the information that we have. But ultimately, it is a individual decision whether to get vaccinated or not. If you are going to make that decision, then, you know, I think each and every one on this board understands and supports individuals in their decisions. If that happens, we are asking then, please mask. If you could please mask in those situations to help protect others, that's what we're doing. We'll continue to ask that. We'll continue to provide the information. We are working towards, hopefully, more folks getting vaccinated if they choose to, but we're going to continue to provide the information. We have heard all types of points of view, and I think the chair and the board does a good job at this point to giving you those opportunities, and we'll continue moving along the path here. Ultimately, as you know, from day one, protecting individual lives and individual family members and loved ones is always an individual decision, but we're going to give everybody the information that hopefully can be made in the right way. If you choose not to, once again, that is your individual right. And we'll continue this until we move past it. But as it said, for sure, till the end of the year, we'll be dealing with this and much longer. So I want to thank everybody on both sides. And I know we're continually to grow, that you're going to hear folks that have a difference of opinion than myself. I made it very clear again, I did get vaccinated. You know, I felt like that was the choice to do for my personal situations and my family that is out there. So we'll continue down that path. That's really what I have to say today, and I will make it very clear. I am not a doctor. You know, I will not do that. I'll provide the information that is given. I will ask the questions. Hopefully it'll help us move forward. But living this in a reality that it is. You know, not only do I have all the employees here that we manage as a board of supervisors, but also a business owner in this community, one of the largest business owners in the South Lake County. This is a reality, whether you're one side or the other, vaccinated, unvaccinated, this pandemic is real. You know, I've experienced it, I've seen it. I have family members that are long haulers that have been affected, you know, and I've seen it from both sides, vaccinated and unvaccinated. So I appreciate it. In the beginning, didn't have that information and that hands-on effect. But now, 17 months later, seeing it and living it every day. So continue to provide the information and hopefully, you know, have an open line of communication. I understand will not agree with everyone, but will always be willing to listen. And I know this board does a good job of that too. So those are my thoughts for today, and you'll hear that same message each week as we move through this process. And I hope that individuals that will not be affected by loss, because that is the worst thing. No matter what we do with politics, rules, government policy, whatever it is, the most important thing is family and friends in this world. And they're the ones being affected by this pandemic. And, you know, I hope no one experiences that loss. And I feel, you know, just for everybody, the 65 deaths that we've had in this county, believe me, for the rest of my life, that will be something that I take with me, that I was on this board when this pandemic happened. So do not take it lightly. That's it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for your comment. Supervisor Pyska.
I want to thank all of you for your comments. It's pretty much what I want to articulate as well. We're clearly in a dangerous place right now. And I'm worried about our people. I'm worried about our economy. We had 3 people die this month. That is real. And the stories of the people, maybe they need to be told right now. People that in our community, I don't know who that one person in my zip code is who died. But if we started to connect the faces to these numbers and telling their stories, then maybe we wouldn't hear during these comments that this is not a reality, because this is real. The fear that people have for the vaccines is also real. And we can continue to have educated conversations, and you can go and have discussions with your doctor and your healthcare provider, and you can seek out that information. This is new and it is scary, and we have to be able to listen to each other and listen to each other's fears and understand that. There are individuals that call in every single week. We as a board accept that they will likely never get vaccinated, and that is their choice, just as it was our choice to get vaccinated. But ultimately, we have to come together and we have to work through this as a community. And it's very difficult when we have so much misinformation swirling around us. So I encourage people with COVID stories, their experiences, their long-haul conditions, the losses that they've had in their families, to come forward and really start to share that with our community so that we can understand more than just the data.
Thank you for your comment. And with that, we will go ahead and close down item 7.5.